It begins with a letter. Not the kind that bears good news or warmth, but one soaked in the cold arrogance of evil. On August 1, 1969, 3 nearly identical envelopes arrived at 3 different newspapers across Northern California: the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. Inside each, a letter, typed in jagged print, toned with superiority, signed with a circle and a cross through it, a symbol that would, in time, become synonymous with pure dread. The writer claimed responsibility for the murders of 2 young couples in the Bay Area. He demanded that the letters be printed on the front page of each paper, or more would die. "I like killing people because it's so much fun," he wrote. It wasn't just a confession. It was a performance. The man, or perhaps the monster, who called himself the Zodiac had arrived. At first, the police treated the letters as possible hoaxes. Reporters thought it might be the work of a sick prankster. But deep down, those who read them could feel something different. An unnerving intelligence, a precision to the way he spoke, and above all, an ego that wanted to be feared. The letters contained cryptograms, complex ciphers of letters and symbols that he promised would reveal his true identity if decoded. But no one knew it yet. Those cryptic puzzles were only the beginning of a twisted relationship between a killer, the media, and a terrified public. And as the people of California would soon learn, this was not a man seeking escape. This was a man seeking immortality. Before the letters, there had been blood. On the night of December 20, 1968, a young couple, 17-year-old David Faraday and 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen, parked their car on a quiet gravel road in Vallejo, California. It was supposed to be their first date. They'd just left a Christmas concert. They never made it home. A passing driver later found them. David slumped against the car door, a bullet wound to the head. Betty Lou lay on the ground nearby, 5 bullets in her back as if she had tried to flee. There was no robbery, no assault, no witnesses, only the stillness of winter and a killer who left nothing behind but death. For months the case went cold. Then, in July 1969, another young couple, Darlene Farron and Michael Mageau, were shot in their parked car at Blue Rock Springs Park, just miles from the first murder site. This time the killer called the police himself. With calm precision, he reported his crime and then, almost mockingly, claimed responsibility for the previous one too. The operator recalled his voice. Low, confident, deliberate. A few weeks later, the letters arrived. That was the revelation. The moment California realized that what they were facing wasn't random. It was orchestrated. The killer was communicating almost theatrically with his audience. He was the director and everyone else, the police, the press, the public, were actors in his play. In the following weeks, the ciphers were printed, and amateur codebreakers across the country tried to decipher them. Finally, a schoolteacher named Donald Hardin and his wife Betty cracked the first cipher, 408 symbols long. The message sent shivers down every spine that read it. "I like killing people because it's so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. When I die, I will be reborn in paradise and those I have killed will become my slaves." It ended with a chilling taunt. "I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife." There it was, a window into the mind of a man who saw murder as art and fear as immortality. The Zodiac's reign of terror stretched from 1968 to 1974, a period that transformed the American psyche. But his killings were never methodical in the way the FBI expected. His victims varied in age, gender, and location. His weapon of choice changed. His tone evolved from playful riddles to open threats. He wanted control, not of his victims but of the narrative. The letters kept coming. Each one a fresh wound in the collective mind of the Bay Area. Some included new ciphers. Others contained pieces of bloody fabric or details only the killer could know. He mocked the police for their incompetence. He insulted them in print. He even began writing directly to famous columnists such as the Chronicle's Paul Avery, taunting him personally. "You're doomed," one card read. But what made the Zodiac unique wasn't just his cruelty. It was his intelligence. He studied police response times, public fear, media appetite, and played them all like instruments. The cipher sent in November 1969, known as the 340 cipher, remained unsolved for over 50 years. It wasn't until December 2020 that a team of codebreakers finally cracked it. And what did it say? "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner, because I now have enough slaves to work for me." Even in death, the Zodiac imagined himself surrounded by the souls of his victims, slaves in an afterlife built on suffering. The investigation became a labyrinth. Every lead led to another dead end. Every suspect seemed to fit, until they didn't. Police departments across multiple counties struggled to coordinate. Evidence was often lost, mishandled, or simply didn't match. There were suspects, yes, hundreds of them, but no proof that held. One man, however, stood out among the rest: Arthur Lee Allen. Allen was intelligent, odd, and lived near several crime scenes. He owned a Zodiac brand wristwatch, the same logo the killer used. He told friends he liked hunting people. But despite mountains of circumstantial evidence, no physical link was ever proven. His fingerprints didn't match. His handwriting didn't match. When DNA testing finally became possible decades later, it didn't match either. Allen died in 1992, still proclaiming his innocence. And the case once again dissolved into fog. So what drove the Zodiac? Serial killers are often profiled through patterns: control, revenge, pleasure, delusion. But the Zodiac blurred those lines. He wasn't motivated by greed, nor lust, nor even simple hatred. His motive seemed almost metaphysical, as though he believed he was part of some cosmic game where death was merely a move on the board. He wanted attention, yes, but not fame in the ordinary sense. He wanted to exist in people's minds, to occupy a permanent place in their fear. Every letter he wrote was designed to make him larger than life, an entity rather than a man. He wanted to be seen as untouchable, eternal. He told police, "I am the Zodiac," as if he were naming not a person but a force. And in a way he succeeded. For decades, people obsessed over him. Amateur sleuths, journalists, cryptologists, even Hollywood directors. Entire communities formed around decoding his letters, dissecting his syntax, tracing his patterns. He became both legend and ghost, a boogeyman of intellect and violence. Some theorists say his motive was simple narcissism, a craving for recognition. Others argue it was about control, about orchestrating fear on a grand scale. But there's another theory, darker and more poetic, that the Zodiac didn't kill for pleasure. He killed to prove something, that society's systems, law, order, morality, were powerless. That intelligence, when stripped of empathy, becomes a weapon sharper than any blade. He wrote about collecting slaves for the afterlife, but perhaps that was metaphor. Perhaps his slaves were never the dead, but the living, the millions who, decades later, would still whisper his name. And so we arrive at the question that still lingers after more than half a century. Could we ever find him? The short answer, maybe. The long answer, perhaps we already did. Over the years, dozens of men have been suggested as the Zodiac. Some were eccentric loners. Others were violent offenders with cryptic past. A few even confessed. But none have ever been definitively proven. Modern DNA analysis has made significant strides. In 2018, the same genetic genealogy methods that caught the Golden State Killer were proposed for the Zodiac case. Samples from his letters and envelopes were re-examined. Hopes rose that the monster might finally have a name. But the results were inconclusive. Contamination, degradation, and the passage of time had eroded much of the usable material. In 2021, an independent group calling themselves the Case Breakers claimed to have identified the Zodiac as Gary Francis Post, a deceased Air Force veteran and house painter from California. They pointed to scars on his forehead resembling those described by witnesses, and cryptic messages allegedly linking him to the crimes. Yet law enforcement, including the FBI, quickly dismissed the claim, citing lack of credible evidence. The Zodiac, it seemed, had slipped once again into shadow. But perhaps that's the cruel genius of it. Perhaps the Zodiac never wanted to be found. In one of his later letters he wrote, "I am waiting for a good movie about me." That line, delivered with smug detachment, reveals something haunting. He foresaw his legacy. He knew that the mystery itself would keep him alive, more than any face or name ever could. He had transcended capture by turning his own identity into a riddle. And in doing so he achieved exactly what he wanted, to become eternal. Even now, when we revisit the grainy police sketches, the man with horn-rimmed glasses and an unremarkable face, we project onto him the terror of not knowing. It could be anyone. A teacher. A neighbor. The man behind you at the grocery store. That's what made him truly terrifying, not his crimes alone, but his invisibility. Fear, when it lingers, becomes part of the culture. The Zodiac's crimes changed California forever. People began locking their doors at night. Lovers stopped parking on quiet backroads. Parents told their children not to trust anyone, even men who smiled. The killer's letters didn't just taunt the police, they poisoned the air of a generation. They made people feel seen by the killer, as though the eyes behind that circle and cross symbol were watching everyone at once. And the press, though they feared him, couldn't look away. Every new letter guaranteed headlines. Every cipher sparked frenzy. In a grim way, the Zodiac understood something fundamental about the media long before most criminals did. That terror sells. His crimes weren't just acts of violence, they were acts of storytelling. And we, society, became his audience. 50 years on, the Zodiac still commands attention. Books, documentaries, podcasts, all try to decode the man who saw himself as a god of death. The 2007 film Zodiac, directed by David Fincher, revived public obsession, reminding new generations of the mystery that remains unsolved. Yet for every new theory, every new suspect, one fact remains: the Zodiac has become something more than human. He is myth. And myths don't die easily. He's a reminder of how terror can evolve, from the physical to the psychological, from murder to mythology. Because maybe, in the end, it was never about the people he killed. Maybe it was about us, about how easily fear can control a society that craves answers. He wrote once, "This is the Zodiac speaking." And perhaps, in a way, he still is. Every time someone types his name into a search bar, or pores over a cipher, or wonders what really lurked behind those coded letters. Maybe one day DNA will tell us the truth. Maybe the last unsolved cipher hides a confession no one has yet understood. Or maybe the truth was lost long ago, buried with the man who wore that symbol on his wristwatch. But maybe, just maybe, finding him isn't the point anymore. The Zodiac's power was never in his body, it was in his shadow. The moment he wrote those first letters, he ensured his story would outlive him. He became a ghost that haunts not only the victims' families but the very idea of justice. Because justice depends on answers. And the Zodiac left us with questions. Who was he? Why did he stop? Did he die? Did he laugh at the news, reading about himself in the paper, watching the world scramble to find a name that no longer mattered? Or, the most unsettling possibility of all, did he simply blend back into society, unremarkable, unnoticed, content in knowing he had already won? The greatest trick the Zodiac ever pulled wasn't escaping capture. It was convincing the world that the story would never end. And in that way, perhaps he truly achieved immortality. Sometimes, at night, historians and amateur sleuths imagine him still, not as the man in the sketch, but as a whisper, a presence. The sound of a typewriter echoing in an empty room, the hiss of a phone line, the scrape of a pen as another letter begins. Maybe the Zodiac is long dead. Or maybe, in some way, he's alive in all of us, in the part of human nature that's drawn to the dark, the unsolved, the unknowable. We chase monsters, but sometimes we build them too. And as long as we keep searching for the Zodiac, decoding his puzzles, retelling his story, we keep him alive. That's the real code, the one we'll never solve. Because it's not written in letters or ciphers. It's written in fear. Another case ends, but the questions remain. Thank you for watching. Kindly subscribe for more true crime stories that refuse to rest.